Hi everyone, I hope you're doing well. Although I can't see you, I'm really happy to be engaging with you, and I hope that you're excited to hear that this is our last project for the school year. Yay! I want to talk a little bit about the color application to the project next, and then with our next video we'll talk about the medium choices you have and maybe some technical issues with those medium choices. First off, I want to remind you that by now you should have created a grid like this on your piece of paper that's 12 inches this way and 9 inches this way, a 1-inch border, and a grid of 1-inch squares from side to side, top to bottom, filling it in. That should be finished by now, and you should be finished with this part too, which is to draw into that grid a pattern. So you'll notice that inside the grid I've darkened up the vertical lines this way, but I kept the grids kind of light, and inside them I've added some circles. I've done diagonal lines from corner to corner of the grids. I've done some vertical lines and horizontal lines within them too, to create what is called pattern. Pattern is the repetition of a unit, such as a circle, a line, a square, a triangle. By repeating them over and over again, we create rhythm and movement, and that's a pattern. Now we want to enhance that with our color use. If you're not finished with this, you're behind in the project. It should have been done by today, all right? So get it done, and a word of caution, don't make this too complex, too complicated, because it might be something that you just can't get finished if it's got too much going on. In the same time, you don't want to make it so simple that it's boring to look at and it doesn't use a color scheme effectively to show the repetition of your objects. So you have to be a little bit creative. You have to do some thinking to make this work for you, but you all can do that. You're good, you're smart, you're capable. Now, I practiced my color scheme before I started applying colors. I chose a color scheme, and before I used my chosen one on my final paper, I did a mock-up of it. Now this one isn't finished, but I like the colors I've chosen. I've got what is called a triadic color scheme in here. I'm sorry, an analogous color scheme going on in here. 3 colors, plus black added to some of the color, plus white added to some of the color, plus gray added to some of the color. And also I've used a little bit of black, a little bit of white, and a little bit of gray in their own places too. But it's mostly color. We're using colors from the color spectrum, and the color wheel is the way we choose them. And the way that I repeat them helps to reinforce the pattern that I've drawn with the shapes. All right, so that's our next step. You do not need to do a practice, but if it helps you to do it well, try it out. Just do it with pencil, color pencil, and see how it works for you after you've chosen the colors that you think you're going to use, so that you kind of get the idea before you commit yourself to the final artwork. All right, so, and it doesn't have to be perfect, right? Because it's just kind of like, oh, I want to try it out and see how it works for me, and you can always change it pretty easily if you don't like the colors that you selected, or if you realize, oh, those colors are too close together to get the idea of a pattern happening. Right? So you can practice it a little bit if you want to. You don't have to. All right? Now let's talk about your color selection. The colors come from the color spectrum. That's the visible white light. Remember, we learned about this in the notes and in the reading that I gave you. If you don't remember the notes, or if you never did them, you should read them. Not only that, but you should do the reading that I've provided for you otherwise too. There's a couple different places where I've asked you to read about color and how we see color and do things. There was even a color worksheet that you did while you did some reading about color. So this is a color wheel, and it has what's called a color harmony chart attached to it. Harmony has to do with making things pretty, going together, right? If you harmonize in music, that means different notes come together and make something beautiful to listen to. Same thing with color. If you put beautiful colors together, they work in harmony together. They create something pleasing to the eye, just like songs make it pleasing to the ear. So we're working with color harmony with what are called color schemes. And we usually do this in this class. We make a color wheel. After we've painted it in place, we attach a color harmony chart, and then we select colors that go together to make harmony in a color scheme. We're not going to do that this year, so I simplified it and made some charts for you to work from instead. And you don't even have to do all of this work. I just made them so you had some choices to make easily on your own. I have these all on the Canvas assignment page. I'm not going to describe them individually. I'm just going to mention how you should select your colors, okay? So you can see there are 6 different color schemes up here on this board. There's a triadic color scheme, a complementary color scheme, an analogous color scheme, alternating color scheme, split complementary, and monochromatic. Each one of those is a different plan or different way to organize the colors on this color wheel. That's what these different sets of lines is all about. And within each of those, I have given you at least 3 options with color choices that you can make for your geometric pattern with a color scheme project. So let's talk about the triadic first, just because this is the one that most of my students seem to gravitate toward. With a triadic color scheme, let's see if we can get a little closer. With the triadic color scheme, what it does is it uses 3 colors that create a triangle on the color wheel. So in this case, I've got yellow, red, and blue drawn there. So here's a triadic color scheme with yellow, blue, and red. Yellow, blue, and red. They make a triangle of space between them. They're evenly spaced around the color wheel from each other. So here's one option with a color scheme using a triadic color scheme. It's yellow, red, and blue. And of course, you'll have to use some black added to some of the colors to make them a little different from each other. You'll have to add white to some of the colors to make them a little different. And maybe even use some gray mixed in with the color to make them a little different. So that makes it your options with just 3 colors more easily done, and it makes it more interesting for me as a viewer and anybody else who's looking at it to enjoy it, okay? If you just try to stick with those 3 colors, you're going to find them running into each other and going and making one big shape instead of small shapes that this is all about. So if you made the red darker or lighter in some places, that creates the contrast that helps you to see it differently, all right? So you need to use, when you add white to a color, that's called a tint of that color. When you add black to a color, that's called a shade of that color. And when you add gray to a color, that's called a tone. We've heard tone before. We've used tone in different meanings in different ways throughout the year, and this is our 3rd meaning for tone. All right? So if I had a triadic color scheme with those 3 colors, I could put them down easily, pure colors in some places, but not everywhere, because they would just kind of start building up bigger shapes than I want. So I have to add tints, shades, and tones in some of the colors to create more variations and to keep it unified. All right? So when I look at this triadic color scheme chart that I made for you guys, there's 1, 2, 3, 4 sets of colors that are different triadic color schemes. So this is one set right here with those 3. This is one set with those 3, one set with those 3, and one set with those 3. So you choose one set of colors only. You don't say, oh, I like these 3 and I'm going to do those 3. Do not do that. That creates confusion, and it doesn't create harmony. It does just the opposite. It creates chaos. And we don't want chaos in this artwork, all right? We want it to be rhythmic, and we want it to be pleasing. Okay, now if you want to have colors that kind of bounce against each other, then you can use a complementary color scheme to do that. All right, well, and I'll just briefly talk about it. So remember, you're using one set of colors from a color scheme that you choose. Let's talk about the others real briefly. With the complementary, it's using 2 colors that are straight across from each other on the color wheel. There's one set of them, there's another set, and here's another set, right? So you only use one set of colors, but you have to make value changes with tints, shades, and tones. 2 colors, not everywhere. You can have some pure red and some pure green, but you can have to make some shades of red, some tints of red, and some tones of red, along with tints, shades, and tones of the green, to make it interesting and to give you enough variation that it doesn't just turn into one big area of red and green. All right? And the same thing goes with these. The analogous color scheme too, 3 colors right next to each other on the color wheel. These are all defined in the lesson on Canvas with these sheets. So if you have any more questions beyond what I've shown you here and on that sheet, investigate them. Go to Google, go to our classroom Facebook page and look at the examples. All of those things will help you to understand it better. Here's a set of colors for the analogous. Here's another set for the analogous color use. Here's another set, right? You only use one set, and they're really close. They're right next to each other on the color wheel. They're very closely related. They're like brothers and sisters, right? Now, a slightly different variation of that is the alternating color scheme. They're colors that are similar. They have a family connection, but there's no direct relationship. The red and the orange, yes, they have, there's red in orange, but it's not the same as red. Okay, so we kind of think of them as being in the same family, but it's a distant family member, more like cousins. And red, orange, and violet are just that. Now, there are others that go with the red and the orange on the other side of it. So, you can investigate it on your own if you want to, getting a color wheel and looking at it and seeing what 3 colors are right next to each other on the color wheel that I like. Here's a different one right here with the yellow, red, and the green, yellow, orange, and the green, or the blue, the green, and the violet. All right? Going on over, split complementary is a lot like complementary. They're not right across from each other on the color wheel like the complementary are. Split complementary uses 2 colors. Let's go back actually to the complementary. Blue and orange are direct opposites on the color wheel. They are the biggest difference between each other that you can possibly get, and there's no family relationship to them. So they're very direct opposites, and they create that little bit of conflict if you like that in your artwork. They're very dynamic when you put them together, or a yellow and violet, or a red and green, right? And making tints, shades, and tones of them. They're straight across from each other on the color wheel, so let me show you what I mean by that. So here's the red right here. Red's right here. And if I go straight across from red, I see it's got green. Red and green are direct opposites on the color wheel, and they are complementary colors. But when we go to split complementary colors, it's very similarly figured out, but instead of using red and green, we use red and the color next to green, which is yellow-green, and then the other green that's on the other side of green, which is blue-green. So the complement of red would be right there between the yellow-green and the blue-green as green. We don't use that green, though. We use the yellow-green and the blue-green with the red, and that's a split complementary color scheme. They call it split complementary because it's like the complements, but they split before it gets to the complement to the 2 colors on the either side of the complement of the original color you want to start with. And then our final one here is monochromatic. With a monochromatic color scheme, you use 1 color. You have to use black, white, and gray mixed in with the color to give it variations, to make it not just one big page of red or yellow or green. You use 1 color, but you have to make changes. When you add white to it, it makes a tint, and in this case it's a pink. When you add black to red, it makes what's called a shade, and when you add gray to a red, it's called a tone. And there's a way to do this with almost any of the mediums that I've given you, but you won't be able to do changes of them with markers. The other medium choices that you have, you can make value changes, but the markers are not easy to do that with without messing up your marker set. All right? Okay, so that's your next job, is to choose your color scheme and 1 set of colors within your color scheme that you want to use for your project. All right? And remember, you can practice it if you want to by just mocking it up, smaller version of it, but eventually you're going to be putting it onto your final paper like I've got for mine. So once you're done selecting your color scheme, go to the next video, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about your color choice, your medium choices, and some technical applications you have to use when you put the colors down on your final paper. All right? Good luck with this.